Titulares de las noticias más destacadas a esta hora en Telesur. En Brasil continúa campaña de desestabilización contra la presidenta Dilma Rousseff. El partido del Movimiento Democrático Brasileño se retiró de la coalición que respalda a la mandataria de esa nación suramericana. Movimientos sociales en Colombia piden al gobierno atender situación de hambruna de los niños guayú. Maestros de Guatemala protestan por recortes de beneficios. Y en Turquía mueren 3 niños de origen sirio en un campamento de refugiados. Ampliamos estos y otros temas en breve, solo por Telesur.
Hi, I'm Laura Flanders. This week on the show, Academy Award nominee Viggo Mortensen on speaking out for justice and remembering to act. All that and a few words from me on Hillary Clinton's warmth and her wars. Welcome to our program. You may know our next guest as an Academy Award-nominated actor who has appeared in scores of movies, including The Lord of the Rings, one of the highest-grossing film series of all time. What you may not know is he's also a poet, photographer, musician, and painter. He speaks 4 languages, and he's the founder and publisher of an independent publishing house, Percival Press. The 12th anniversary edition of Percival's collection of essays in response to the Iraq occupation, Twilight of Empire, was released this winter with essays by Mike Davis, Amy Goodman, Jody Evans, and Dennis Kucinich, among others, and with a foreword from Howard Zinn. Very glad that it brings Viggo Mortensen to our program. Viggo, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you. Twilight of Empire. 12 years ago, we thought it was a twilight. What happened?
Well, the empire continues to crumble, but like most empires, if not all of them, when they go down, they don't go down gracefully, and they cause a lot of harm around them as they go down. It's a book that we had run out of our stock because fortunately it had the couple editions we've printed had sold out, and I reread the book. I hadn't read the whole thing for many years, and I started looking at these essays and poems and reports from Americans, Canadians, Iraqis, you know, on-the-ground reports from Baghdad and other places in Iraq, and, you know, all kinds of people contributed to this. In 2003, when the invasion and occupation of Iraq was happening. And on reading it again, on the one hand, as an editor, I thought, well, great, this book is still really timely. And on the other hand, as a human being, I thought, how unfortunate. This material is still timely. And the story hasn't changed. It's just become more complex. Yeah. It's become worse. The consequences that could have been predicted and were spoken about by people like Dennis Kucinich, like Howard Zinn, at the time, they've come to pass, and then some. Yeah. And the mess we have in the Middle East and West Asia, I mean, it has a lot to do with what happened then. So I decided to reprint it, and I thought it would be good to have a couple of new essays. And fortunately, Anthony Arnove, who's co-author of another book I'm here for, Voices of a People's History of the United States, Howard Zinn and Anthony Arnove put that together. Anthony wrote a really fine foreword, and so did Dennis Kucinich, who was a lone voice at the time, as you know.
You want to read a little bit from what Dennis Kucinich had to say? I mean, he was lone, but there were, what, millions of people in the streets
there were millions,
agreeing with
and he
him.
talks about that, among other things. I mean, I'll read you just the beginning of it, because it's fairly long. It'll give you an idea of why do this book now? What's the deal about republishing this? Those of us who knew in 2002 that there was no cause to invade Iraq, those who raised their voices for the cause of peace, who gathered together, marched, protested, and lobbied incessantly against the unjustified rush to war, summon the power of their humanity to demand that America's leaders cease and desist from their ill-considered plan to attack that Western Asian country. With the publication of Twilight of Empire 12 years ago, all who cared enough to challenge the venality and prevarication of the U.S. government could have seen that a benchmark had been established in chronicling the abject corruption of this unprovoked aggression. Unfortunately, the will to war against Iraq was so powerful that it nullified the demands of millions of Americans who openly and vocally insisted Iraq should not be made to pay a price for the terrorist attacks of 9/11, which that country had nothing to do with. The will to war ignored all evidence brought forward in October of 2002, and presently directed by myself to fellow members of Congress, which posited that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, that Iraq had no intention or capability of attacking the U.S., and that Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction, and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of frames it from
You say it
today.
very beautifully in your foreword. You say that there is a dangerous gap, I think that's the words you use, the dangerous gap between what the media tell us and what can, I think you say, so readily be observed on the ground. 12 years on, what do you think is falling into that gap? What if you could get on a jet and go and see for yourself? Would you want to see and report?
Well, it's as much a conveyor belt slash reality show as the endless stream of media, from the right, from the left, from the center, from overseas. Product, smoke screens, diversions, redirections, whether it's the invasion of Iraq or the theft of the election by George W. Bush and his helpers, including his brother Jeb Bush, the governor of Florida, his father George Herbert Walker Bush, whether it's the pretext, the flimsy pretext for invading Iraq in the first place. These things are talked about in passing. A firecracker was thrown some time ago by Donald Trump just to get under Jeb Bush's skin about his father being inept or not doing the right thing. I mean about not his father, his brother, George W. Bush, 9/11 or the invasion of Iraq itself and so forth. But nobody really talks about the real issues. Nobody gets to the heart of the matter. It's just personality issues, and it just keeps recycling. So some people do try to comment. Some people do try to get to the heart of the matter, but it's very few voices.